Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first roundtable of 2022. My name's Tom. I'm lead technology strategist here at UNRVLD, and today we're going to be helping to demystify some of the concepts of headless architecture and provide some practical guidance on how your business can move forwards towards a composable DXP, whatever your starting point is. So hopefully there's something practical in here for everyone. I'm joined today by Rick Madigan, a fellow digital strategist here at UNRVLD. Rick's got lots of experience with composed architectures and is going to kick things off for us. So over to you, Rick.
Great. Okay. So just really on what we're going to cover today, we've broken this down into 4 sections. So we're going to start off with some scene setting to really unpack what headless is and what it really means, and try, like Tom said, demystify some of those concepts. And then from that, then bring those concepts to life through a set of scenarios to try and illustrate how these architectures are applied in the real world. And then talking about how the kind of criteria really to help you choose the right architecture, and then some practical key steps right at the end there on how to get started and how to move through. So for a starting point, one of the things we wanted to do was just take a bit of a temperature check on everyone's kind of knowledge and awareness of the subject. So there should be a poll coming into the Q&A now, really just to find out what drove your attendance today. And overwhelmingly it's option number 4, so I just want to learn more about headless. So that's great. The presentation today is definitely gonna cover off that and help explain it in a lot more detail. So I guess if we move through, and we'll start with the first section, the scene setting, and explain what we actually mean by headless. And as a starting point, we want to take a bit of a step back and just think about the journey so far. So if we go back to 2011, we were very web focused, and reality was that what we would call the traditional DXP, or the in some arenas the monolithic DXP, was kind of the go-to solution, because people were getting to grips with how to do content management. They really wanted a simple solution that could bring together all these different pieces, and we were only really ever focused on that web channel. That was really where a lot of the effort was going. As you fast forward then into 2016, that's now quite a common piece of software within the broader architecture. There is some movements towards decoupling that are starting to happen, so basically separating out that front end to start becoming more responsive, dealing with the kind of increased usage in mobile. And there are sort of whispers of headless that are moving around, and typically that's coming from the developer corner, where there are developers experimenting with a lot of these different types of technology, but commercially there's not a huge amount that's happening. Then as you move through then to 2020, headless is gathering momentum, and it's on a lot of people's lips, and you can see analysts such as Gartner and Forrester talking a lot about not just headless, but the broader concept of composable, which is something we're going to talk about today. So for many companies here, they are typically on an architecture like this that you would see, where it's dominated by a single piece of technology. It's often either coupled or at least semi-coupled between the front end, what the user actually sees, and then the business logic that's there at the back. It might still be responsive, but there's still that connection between the two. Quite often the software is hosted by the customer on their own server, so it's expensive to support, to host, to upgrade, and because you're paying for these big servers, issues start to creep in when you're looking at performance and performing at scale, and there is that element of vendor lock-in, and a lot of people are starting to find themselves in this position. And while you've got the world around you that is changing, it's clear that there's a necessary change that needs to happen, and many people are growing frustrated with that architecture. There's often limitations that are quickly spotted around existing systems that are quickly exposed as you're getting increased traffic and engagement through those platforms, and you're not able to scale as much as possible. From a customer point of view, they're consuming content and engaging with you across an increasing number of channels. And from their point of view, particularly across the younger generations, there's a higher demand for that seamless experience. They want you to remember the conversation you had on channel A while they're talking to you on channel B. For companies as well, there's an increased pressure on them to match that pace of digital evolution. And these traditional architectures are holding them back. And particularly as they start to fill the gaps by buying other pieces of marketing technology, your digital estate's becoming increasingly complicated, and there's that need for interoperability that needs to happen that can't be solved through the traditional model. And that's really where Headless has come about. And you've kind of got the definition there on screen, but the word headless wildly changes depending on who you're speaking to and the context in which it's used. Really, for us, at the heart of it, headless is all about this drive towards user-centric experiences. And it's a kind of a shift change in how you think about architecting and using technology in the background to actually support that user-centric experience. But headless is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to it. And as you delve into this world, there are so many terms that start to emerge. And it becomes really confusing on what means what and what overlaps with what. We've got a few of those examples there on the left. If I pick out a couple of them, so we'll start with one that's quite common at the moment. So MAC, which in principle is a set of technology principles and a framework that promotes the idea of a composable architecture. The idea being that it's agile, that it can shift with external influences, that it's flexible so that you can plug in what you need, and that it's future friendly so it can evolve over time without needing to be rebuilt from the ground up every time. And it's broken down into those four pieces, all of which we'll start to talk about as we move through the presentation today. The first is the idea of microservices, which is basically breaking down your system into smaller discrete services to deal with specific functions rather than one big system that's trying to do a lot of it. The idea of API first, so basically separating systems. So it's not just about separating the front from the back. It's about separating all these systems in the background so that it's easier to replace things as you move forward. The idea of cloud native, so moving away from the idea of hosting everything yourself to try and move things offline as best as you can. Sorry, not offline, into the cloud, so that you're using SaaS type services or everything as a service to try and make it more efficient from a cost point of view. And then that idea of headless, of building an architecture that can allow you to engage with customers across channels from a central set of services, content, and assets. The other one that you will probably hear that often comes up is Jamstack, which rather confusingly overlaps a lot with Mac, but again, it's something we're going to talk about today in some of our scenarios. It's very similar to Mac. It's an architectural approach. It's really focused on user-centric experience and delivering greater performance. The definition has changed slightly, but it's always really been based on on three key principles. The first being the idea of decoupling, so separating front from back. The second being static first, which is trying to change people's perception and think about how you deliver experiences in a slightly different way. So rather than just building applications as we always have done, think about where you could use what we call static sites, which is where you might create a site that consumes all the content, is pre-rendered, and then you load it rather than through a server, through a content delivery network. Really, which brings down your cost and increases performance. And then that idea of progressive enhancement, which is where you are focused on making sure that people can use your application, your site as quickly as they can, and then loading in the bells and whistles after the fact. So it's nice and easy. Cool. This has gone a bit awry. Right, so let's simplify it. So if we break it down to three types of architectural model and step away from all the buzzwords. We can break it down to these three, which are the ones that we want to talk you through. So the first is the idea of decoupled. The second is around composable or modular, which we'll explain, and the third being composable component. So we'll start with the first one. So decouple, what do we mean by this? So as you look at the diagram to the right, it's very similar to the diagram we had right at the start of the traditional architecture. The difference being two core things, that we're separating and abstracting away that front end from the back end, making it very clear that we can start to create that decoupling. And also this back end is no longer something that's hosted by you, it is a cloud hosted solution. The digital estate itself is still dominated by a single product with multiple capabilities. So it'll have content management, experience management, commerce, but it has that ability to surface for different channels on the front end. So there's a degree of freedom over that front end implementation. There's some integration capability. And then from a channel perspective, really it's ideal for the web and it's ideal for progressive web apps. That's really where its strengths lie. The second is around what we call composable modular. And this is the idea that you've got, rather than the vendor providing one single huge piece of software, they break it down into smaller products. So you'll have a content management product, you'll have a DAM product, maybe a search product, commerce, personalization. It's all built around the idea of a composable architecture and Mac principles. The idea being that you could, if you wanted to, use all the products from that vendor, or you could just use the ones that you actually need. Or the third solution is that you use some of the items from that vendor, and then you augment that with products that you might have, which might be products that you already own. It might be products that you need to buy because they are better suited to what you actually need. The idea is the integration capability is strong. It's built for that idea of plug and play, and it's designed for omnichannel. It's designed to work across different channels. The last piece is what we would call composable components. And this, again, very similar architectural model to the last one. The big difference here is it's fully composable. You're using products from lots of vendors. And again, built around the principles of Mac, it's often referred to as the best of breed architecture. I actually prefer the term best of need, because it's not necessarily about what is the best product in the market, it's what's the best product for you and for what you're trying to achieve. And that's how this architecture is assembled over time. And you can have certain products that might do one or two functions. It's designed for omnichannel across the board. So if they're the models, what about the market and how's that changing? If we look at some of the traditional vendors, they've all taken their own approach to this. From Sitecore's point of view, over the last few years, there's been a lot of activity in acquisition, with them buying up companies. And last year started to talk more about their new world, their composable architecture that they're bringing in, where they've started to split apart their platform into lots of products, with the idea being that you could buy them all and use them all. You could buy a subset of those for just what you need, or you could use them with other pieces of technology. So it's that idea of modular composable. Optimizely is a similar story. I mean, even pre the acquisition of Optimizely by Episerver, they'd already started to break the platform into these smaller components around content, intelligence, and commerce. And that's maintained, and they're able to, again, use products in smaller components or sell it as a whole. Kensco took a slightly different route with their dual rail. So their original product became Experience, and then have released a content as a service or headless CMS offering in the form of content, again, to try and tackle these different architectural models. And you're seeing that across the board from all the different vendors that are out there. Acquia with their open DXP, and Salesforce and Adobe with the acquisitions that they've been making to build out their own ecosystems. And a lot of this is in response to what's happening here, that there's increasing competition from these specialists who are driving towards both the composable modular and the composable components architectural models, because they're excellent at what they do within the function that they're doing it at. So you're starting to see this across different parts of the MarTech landscape as these items are coming through. So that's enough of the scene setting. I'm going to hand over to Tom to talk about bringing this to life through some scenarios.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, so we're now going to explore some sort of common scenarios using fictitious businesses that are in different situations, but they're all looking to capitalize on the benefits of Headless. So there's going to be a poll at the end of each one asking which of the three architectures that Rick's just presented would most suit their needs. Don't worry, we won't be publishing the results. This is just a bit of fun, but just wanted to get you thinking the right way. So first one. Yeah, so the first one, we've called this the Tyrell Corporation. It's a global services business that's heavily invested in recent years in their current platform on Sitecore XP. So they've got no appetite for a large project. They've just done one. They recognise that a headless architecture will bring them more agility and improve site performance, but they want to iterate towards this over a period of time rather than some big project, like I said. They have a great relationship with Sitecore, so they're reluctant to lose this. So their website, it promotes multiple global brands, each with their own identities. And the big project that had just happened was to consolidate a big disparate estate of brands to get them all into one central hub. It has multilingual requirements, quite complex content types, content workflow, complex permissions for lots of different regional teams. So their drivers are around performance, scalability, and just giving the team agility. Their internal team is a large team that's dispersed across multiple territories. So this is where all the complex permissions models come in. But they've got a pretty decent budget, so they spend 500k plus a year on their retained team. So they have a team in place that could make some significant change over a 12-month period. So all things considered, so their current architecture looks like this. They have this kind of classic XP scenario with an integration for a search provider, something like Algolia, and a CRM integration, something like perhaps Salesforce. They have a separate portal that deals with support, so they've got two separate user pools at the moment, which isn't ideal. So based on what they need, I'm just going to ask you a quick poll that's just popped up in the chat, or will be shortly. Which approach right? Should it be the decoupled approach, where they just separate out the front end, composable modular, where they start to use perhaps Sitecore's new stack of composed modules, or do they go for a fully best of breed approach with all new systems? I'm impressed. So yeah, there's still a couple coming through, but there's an overwhelming majority are saying the composable modular, which is absolutely right. So sorry, just bear with me. Yeah, so and just some of the rationale around that. So the composable architecture brings agility and improved performance, which is what they needed. Core functionality is handled by Sitecore New World products, so they keep that relationship with Sitecore going. Their other products are now better integrated. They have a seamless user journey now between the main portal and the site. So what we've done here is we've separated out the user management into a standalone service. That might be some SSO tool. And what that basically means now, they no longer have those siloed data sets that we were talking about. And user management is centralized in that a central profile, which improves the customer experience on the site as well. Okay, well done, everyone. That was a good start. So next example is a fictitious company called Nakatomi Trading Corporation. These are a global electronics manufacturer. They're looking for a full re-architecture of their digital estate, and they want all the best tech to do that. They're held back currently because they're on a single vendor offering, so they're kind of wedded to the roadmap of the provider, and that's a bit restricting for them. They're not getting value from very big license fees at the moment that they're paying, and they want to establish a single customer view, but there's gaps in their data model. So the website characteristics of this one, so its legacy technology stack, like I said, the traditional DXP. They get high traffic, which means that they have some performance problems when they get to those high traffic events. They have some commerce functionality on the site, microsite requirements for spinning up campaign sites, etc. And they like to do advanced personalization to tailor the experience. So their key drivers are customer experience. They want the total flexibility around the front end. They want usable marketing technology that's easy to use, that their team can get their heads around quickly and get campaigns out the door fast. And they're obviously looking for better return on their licensing spend. So their internal team, they have a core central team, but with some regional resource, but they're really just struggling with the complexity of their incumbent platform. So there is an appetite here to invest, and they've got a decent budget, so they'd be spending sort of 400k plus on a rebuild. So this is their current solution. It's basically the classic DXP. So they've got everything that they need as part of the stack, but you'll see the faded out areas here are where they're just not using this feature. So they're kind of paying for stuff they don't use, and they're looking to simplify. And there's probably an ERP integration going on in the background to process orders, etc. Okay, same question again, going into the chat, into the Q&A. Which approach is right? Decoupled, composable modular, or composable components? Just give you a moment to answer that. Okay, just to give you another moment. Right, again. Okay, so we've got some split response here, but primarily we are saying composable components. Some are suggesting decoupled, but our opinion is that the composable components approach is right. So the majority of you said that. Well done. Obviously, there is no exact science. This is just our opinion, but the rationale here is that they're an ambitious business, highly competitive sector, and they're wanting best of breed. So the best way to get that is to go out to market and to source the best component parts of all the things you're looking to do, and you can see that here in the diagram. It's 100% flexible, so they have that entire flexibility around design across all components in the system, and it's an intuitive set of component parts that can be swapped out as required, giving them the agility that they're looking for. Okay, so last one. The last example is a charity we've called Sturdy Wings. So this is a national charity that uses their website to showcase their good work, promote their fundraising events and collect donations. They're happily operating on the Kentico Experience EMS. It's a self-hosted kind of classic setup with a coupled solution. They've encountered performance issues when they do big campaigns. So imagine, I don't know, Red Nose Day or something like that, where they're going to get a huge flood on a single day. Their site does struggle, but they've also got requirements for a new app that they're considering, and they're thinking about how they can deliver this cost effectively. And they're also environmentally conscious as an organisation. So the website characteristics: content focused, primarily a brochure kind of wear site. They take donations. They have some very basic commerce. Sell a few t-shirts and things, but nothing sophisticated. And they have an integrated CRM for doing their mailing campaigns. So the drivers for these guys is performance at scale. That's the main thing. They do have some multi-channel needs with the new app, but really they just like the simplicity of just one system to do it all. So their internal team is small. They don't have the capacity for learning lots of other systems. And their development budget, again, is more modest, so they're probably spending a couple of $100,000 a year on kind of their digital estate. So yeah, this is how it looks, similar to the other one, just an all-in-one, but on Kentico this time, and they've got a CRM plugged in. So same question again: decoupled, composable modular, or composable components? I wonder if you've worked it out yet. Looks like it. Okay, yeah, I don't think there's any surprises on this one. So it's the one that's left. So yeah, it's the decoupled approach. And the reason is, so the cost of the other options just can't be justified. You know, it is a sizable investment to rip out your platform and replace it with best of breed components. So the other options are not really suitable. It maintains the benefits of the all-in-one, which they like. Their team hasn't got capacity for learning lots of systems. It opens up the content to other channels. So you'll see here now they do have an API in front of it all where they can send that content into the mobile app and what have you. And but I guess in this context, what we'd probably recommend is looking at things like a progressive web app as an alternative to creating a separate mobile app. Two benefits: it's cheaper to do, but also it's greener. They're environmentally conscious, so maintaining one website is a lot better than having a web and an app that consumes much more bandwidth. Okay, so hopefully it seems like everyone's keeping up because everybody pretty much got the right answer on that last question. So just a summary around choosing the right architecture and things to remember. So this is a chart that we borrowed off Kentico actually, and I've liked this for the past couple of years. I just think it explains things really nicely. So basically, composable has has sweet spots at either end of the scale, shall we say. So if you're doing a very simple site like a blog or something like that, then composable is great because you can just get a basic headless CMS, configure your content types, and pull those articles into any kind of front end. Likewise, at the other end of the scale, if you've got a highly complex system that really needs best of breed components, it needs there's lots and lots of integrations coming from specialist providers. Maybe sports sector is a great example for this, where they have data feeds coming in, video platforms providing live streams, things like that. Then composable is great again at the other end, where you can just compile lots of these individual systems together and make up an enterprise platform. Where it kind of falls over slightly is that kind of mid complexity solution, a bit like what the charities have got, where you don't really need the best of everything. What you really just need is one platform that can do it all. So there is still a use case for that, and it kind of sits nicely in that kind of mid budget, mid market type scenario. Yeah, and what that brings obviously is all the flexibility and the agility that we've described on the other slides. So conversely, the decoupled DXP sits in the other side of it. So it sits in the middle there, where, like I just said, it's better suited to the smaller teams where you've maybe just got, you know, mid volumes, mid complexity of requirements. You know, you're not overly worried about scale and things like that. But you just basically need the simplicity of the single platform that does it. Really good for doing things. Its main focus around here is web and things like progressive web apps, maybe pushing to a mobile app. What you wouldn't really use this approach for is if you're pushing out to other channels, digital signage, metaverse, conversational AI, these sorts of things. Much better if you go down the compose route where you've got specialist vendors configured for that. Okay, so I'm just going to pass back over to Rick, who's just going to give you some practical steps for getting started with all of this.
Excellent. Right. Okay. So we've broken this down into 5 steps that we wanted to take you through, that we feel kind of the right moves to make as you start to iterate towards one of these architectural models. So if we take a look at the first step. There we go. So the first, unsurprisingly, it's about answering the big questions and understanding the vision and strategy that sits behind this. And it's not just about understanding your technical vision, but also understanding more about your customer experience vision. If you understand your audience, where you're engaging with them now, where you need to be engaging with them, and making sure that you can tick all these boxes. And if you don't, or you don't have all this information, it's then either taking that in-house to build it out yourself, or if you don't have the capability, engaging with someone to do that, so that you can get that strong foundation in place right from the start to help you as you start to move forward. Once you've done that, it's then about the gap analysis. So you from all your information, you'll understand where you are right now at all the different perspectives. So from a customer experience perspective, the architecture, the data model, and the infrastructure, and your vision will tell you what the future should be. And that's a really clear distinction on should, because things can change. So it's being very clear about that's the possible direction that you're heading in. And then looking at what the gap is in between. What tasks do you need to do? What digital initiatives, programs of work, and collecting all those into a list. And that list is going to be fairly unstructured. So now it's all about prioritizing that list and starting to make some sense out of the chaos. And tools as simple as effort versus impact can be really useful here to start to break that down and really place the focus back onto value and where you can get the most value out of the platform. And it's really that top left quadrant. Those are the items we want to get started with and the iterations that we want to make in the first instance. From there, it's then about building the roadmap. And we know what priority one needs to be. It's the quick wins. It's those first steps to prove the value the ROI that we're getting. But then you can organize the rest into these sort of loosely drawn priorities for 2, 3, 4, rather than phases. We call them priorities because the reality is things can change. If we go back to what we were talking about right at the very start of the presentation, the market's constantly changing, digital's changing, and customers are changing. So locking yourself into a fixed path is a recipe for disaster. It's about introducing flexibility into that roadmap so that as you're moving along, you can adjust things, you can move things between priorities, bring things forward, push things back, or even switch them out for brand new things so that you are constantly focused on delivering what is most valuable to your audience. And to do that is really that fifth step about baking in this model of build, measure, learn into everything that you do. So as you start to release these quick wins or smaller programs, getting the measurement in, which is probably more than just analytics. It's thinking about qualitative sources, user testing, thinking about heat mapping, application performance, sentiment analysis, all the dimensions that are relevant to what you're trying to do, so you can learn from it and use it to adjust that roadmap. So just to reiterate again, you're constantly focused on value and how to deliver it. And it's really through those 5 key steps that these are the best way of moving forward. With any of these approaches, a big bang is never a good idea because it usually ends in a lot of money being spent and a lot of pain. Iterating towards it over time can help, and it helps bring people along for the journey as well. Great, so those are the 5 steps. I'm going to hand back to Tom to wrap this up, and then we can take any questions.
Great. So headless can mean many things. It can mean decoupled, it can mean composable modular, or it can mean composable components. So what we're saying is just be structured in your approach. First of all, get the foundations in place, do the vision, set your vision, have a strategy, look at the market, look at what you're doing, look at your objectives, and sensibly think about like what is a good first step for your business to take advantage of this new technology architecture. Understand the gaps between where you are now and where you need to be. Categorize them, like Rick says, prioritize which are the key components you might break off first. Typically, we've found that where it often makes sense is to start doing things like decoupling your DAM, get your assets into a central store that can be used by all systems. Then you might look at breaking your users out, get your users out into a standalone system. User migration is always a big pain if you re-architect or change your platform. So having users as a standalone pool that no matter what systems do, no matter what your websites and CMS platforms might be and things that you're doing with that users, that pool stays the same. Their username and password never needs to change no matter what you do. Another area could also be things like separating out the customer data platform. So breaking out the data, breaking out the single customer view element and the segmentation. So again, those segmentations can be used across any marketing channel that you have. They're often common starting points. Would you agree, Rick? Anything you want to add on that?
No, I think they are the best areas to start and the ones we always recommend.
Good stuff. So yeah, so construct your roadmap, but allow for some flexibility. Things change. You might find that, you know, a new opportunity arrives. So this is where having kind of like we find that the most effective change comes where you have like an agile retained team shape, you know, who can rather than trying to tackle all this through one big project. It's much better to kind of iterate to this over a period of time. And finally, yeah, build, measure, learn. You know, if you're going to fail fast, as they say, and just take those learnings and improve your next implementation. Okay, so that's pretty much all we wanted to go through. Hopefully that's been insightful. So just the final poll before we maybe open to some questions. So how do you feel about Headless now? You know, is it much clearer on Headless, and are you much clearer on Headless and what the options are open to? What options are open to you? Are you confident now that the approach you've chosen is the right one if you've just made that call? Are you excited about this and have got some ideas now for the future? Or do you still not understand what it means? Hopefully most of you do, given that everybody got the last question right. But yeah, I'd be interested just to hear how you think it's gone. The two responses that we've had, yeah, they're all coming through these same two. So they're coming through as, I'm much clearer on Headless and what options are open to me, so fantastic. And also I'm excited about this approach and I've got some ideas for the future. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining. Hope you've enjoyed your breakfast and that this has been useful. And we are always at hand, as we say, to support you in any of this decision making.